It was supposed to be a time of reflection. 10 nuns entered the mountain convent in silence, but by sunrise on the 5th day, only 9 sat at the breakfast table. The air was still and cold as the transport van rolled to a stop at the top of Mount Ember. Dense pine trees framed the narrow gravel road, while mist curled around the ancient stone walls of the convent like fingers beckoning the weary inward. St. Therese of the Hills had stood for over 180 years, and though the world had changed beyond its gates, very little had changed within them. 10 nuns stepped out of the van, one by one, each clutching a small leather bag, rosary beads, and a worn Bible. They were from different orders and corners of the country, brought together for a 5-day silent retreat meant to deepen reflection, renew vows, and strengthen spiritual discipline. But something else brought them here too, something older. Leading them was Mother Benedicta, tall and severe with steel-gray eyes that didn't waver. A nun for nearly 50 years, she had taken the vow of silence to its highest form. Most whispered that she had once served as abbess in Rome before retreating into the shadows of this forgotten convent. Then there was Sister Clarice, our narrator in thought, practical and sharp-minded. She questioned things others accepted blindly. She had never been to this retreat before, but something had tugged at her spirit when she read the invitation, like a whisper between the lines. Among the group were Sister Lourdes, the youngest, barely 22, full of innocent zeal and prone to over-apologizing with a smile. Sister Magdalena, who rarely made eye contact, her black habit flowing like shadows. Sisters Agnes, Evangeline, Ruth, Teresa, and Marguerite rounded out the 10. The doors creaked open to reveal the convent interior, arched hallways lit by flickering candles, stone floors worn by centuries of footsteps, and the overwhelming silence. Not even the usual bird songs seemed to dare break the hush. Each nun was shown to her room, simple, spare, and cold. A crucifix on the wall, a prayer mat, a wooden bed. No talking was permitted for the next 5 days. No phones, no clocks. Only the bell would guide their days. Prayers at dawn, mass at noon, meditation at dusk. Clarice felt the air thicken with every hour. She would later write, "It wasn't the silence that unnerved me. It was what the silence seemed to be hiding." Clarice began to notice the chapel windows didn't reflect light correctly. When the sun rose, the stained glass seemed to flicker from within, as if candlelight pulsed behind them. That evening, she passed Sister Lourdes kneeling in the corridor, unmoving, whispering prayers to a crucifix nailed sideways to the wall. When Clarice tried to help her, Lourdes simply blinked and walked away without a word. Sister Magdalena lingered at the edges of the group. During meals, she would sit, stare at her untouched food, and scribble in a small notebook. Clarice would catch her eyes sometimes. There was something watchful in them, something that didn't quite belong. It began with the bell ringing at 3:12 a.m. That was wrong. Clarice sat up in bed, heart pounding. She wasn't the only one. Down the hall, she heard the creak of another door. She peeked through the crack and saw Sister Magdalena, barefoot, gliding down the hallway toward the chapel. Curiosity overrode caution. Clarice followed from a distance, careful not to let her steps echo. She reached the chapel doors and found them slightly ajar. Inside, only candlelight. Magdalena stood at the front, staring at the altar. Then she turned and looked directly at Clarice, as if expecting her. Without a word, she walked out a side door and vanished. Clarice entered the chapel, heart racing. The altar candles were freshly lit, the communion chalice missing. A faint smell of sulfur lingered in the air. The nuns gathered at the dining hall. Only 9 chairs were filled. Sister Lourdes was gone, her bed made, her Bible on the pillow. But something was missing. Her rosary, which she never took off, was coiled neatly on the stone floor. Clarice broke protocol. She looked at Mother Benedicta and whispered, "Where is she?" The Mother Superior stared ahead, then said, for the first time in days, "We will continue. God sees all." That night, Clarice couldn't sleep. She searched the hallway, hoping to find any sign of Lourdes. Behind a loose brick in the hallway, she found a small leather prayer journal. its pages full of nervous writing. The last entry read, "I heard him last night, in the crypt, whispering in Latin. I don't think he's a priest. I don't think he's even alive. He is not who he claims to be. I saw him in the crypt last night." Clarice's hands trembled. She looked up at the crucifix above her door, and for a fleeting second, it looked like the figure of Christ had turned its head. Clarice did not sleep. With the journal hidden beneath her pillow, she spent hours staring into the dark corners of her cell, straining to hear what Lourdes might have heard. The silence had changed. It wasn't peaceful anymore. It was thick, watchful, as though it were waiting for someone else to speak. At dawn, the bell rang. The remaining 9 assembled at the chapel. Mother Benedicta said nothing of Lourdes, nor did anyone else. But Clarice saw the shift in their eyes. Even the quietest sisters now looked toward the windows with unease, their prayers quicker, their eyes darker. After the morning meditation, a folded piece of paper had been slipped under Clarice's door. In careful handwriting, it read, "Meet me where the ivy grows." Clarice knew where that was, near the side of the convent, behind the old sacristy. Ivy had overtaken an arched stone wall, once part of the original monastery before it burned. She waited until dusk. There, Sister Magdalena was already waiting. She did not smile. "You read the journal?" Magdalena whispered. Clarice nodded. What did she mean about the crypt? "This place has always had a secret," Magdalena said, "and the silence is part of it." She pulled back a vine. Behind it, a cellar door. Old, chained. She used a rusted key. Inside, the air was thick with mold and candle soot. The cellar dropped into a narrow corridor, lit only by Magdalena's lantern. The walls had old carvings. Not Latin, something older. At the far end, a small room, and within it, signs of recent occupation. A thin mattress, a wool blanket, crumbs, a candle stub, a single black leather shoe. "Someone was here," Clarice said. "Or still is," Magdalena whispered. She held up a torn piece of Lourdes habit. Clarice looked up to find a fresco on the ceiling, flaking from age. It depicted a priest surrounded by light and 12 kneeling women. His hands bled, but the face had been scratched out. Clarice and Magdalena returned from the cellar in silence, their lantern extinguished just before re-entering the main corridor. The stone wall sealed behind them like a vault. Later that night, when all others were asleep, Magdalena returned with a locked leather binder. Convent archives she had been collecting over the years. "I wasn't here just for a retreat," she admitted. "I came because my aunt vanished here in 1975. Her name was Sister Isabel. Same pattern, same silence. They told our family she left her vows, but I found this." Inside the binder were photos of the 1975 retreat group. 10 women, 1 missing. A copy of a letter addressed to the Vatican, dated 1932, warning of street Therese aberrant practices, and a redacted page from the convent's founding document. The founder's name, chiseled out. "Why erase a name?" Clarice whispered. "Because names have power," Magdalena replied, "especially when whispered by the wrong mouths." They climbed the old bell tower, one of the only places where they could talk without echoes. There, they found more symbols, the same ones etched into the cellar. Clarice recognized a repeated symbol, a tongue crossed out by thorns. "He was trying to become something more than a saint," Magdalena said. "He believed that silence was a holy force, a gate to visions. He wanted to become that gate." Later, Sister Evangeline began to behave strangely. She was once serene, now pacing, muttering, painting black crosses in her journal. Mother Benedicta looked tired. She rarely blinked, and during Mass, she left early, clutching something wrapped in velvet. That night, Clarice dreamed of a voice whispering in broken Latin. It said her name, backward. When she woke, her Bible pages had been shredded into tiny squares and arranged into the shape of a door. Clarice and Magdalena returned to the crypt beneath the altar that night, armed with a lantern and a small iron crucifix Magdalena had taken from the tower. The storm had moved in quickly. Lightning slashed across the sky, and the rain pounded like drums against the stained glass. As they descended, the smell of sulfur and old wax returned. This time, deeper in the shadows, they found a hidden door previously sealed shut. The bricks had been disturbed. The door now hung open. Inside was another chamber, round and low. Bones lined the walls. Kneeling skeletons. Dozens. At the center was Sister Lourdes alive, eyes wide, hands bound in prayer. Her lips were sealed with red wax. Clarice cried out, rushing to her. Magdalena worked the bindings loose. Lourdes collapsed, gasping silently. Then came footsteps. Mother Benedicta entered, holding the velvet-wrapped item. Communion chalice, no longer silver, but darkened with age and inscribed with those same thorned tongues. He was almost ready, she whispered. You interrupted too early. She lifted the chalice, but Magdalena threw the iron crucifix. It hit the chalice, and both shattered. A scream tore through the crypt. The bones shuddered. A dark mist spiraled from the stone floor. A figure formed, hooded, faceless, and vast. The founder, the saint of silence. Clarice grabbed the bell rope hanging through the stone ceiling and rang it with all her strength. The peals echoed. The scream dissolved. The figure disintegrated into ash. The crypt collapsed. They escaped into the storm, dragging Lourdes through the front gates. When rescue teams arrived the next morning, only 3 nuns waited. The others, Mother Benedicta, Sister Evangeline, and 4 more, were never found. But 9 veils were recovered from the chapel floor. Clarice wrote in her final letter to the bishop, "We were 10. Now we are 9. But only 3 of us walk freely. The others remain with him, forever silent." If you think silence is peaceful, think again. What happened at Mount Ember was never meant to be heard until now. Subscribe to Haven Tales for more stories they tried to keep buried.